happy hour. So I'm excited to be here with you, and I'm joined by one of my oldest and dearest, most hardcore music evangelist friends in the world, David and Michael. Super psyched to be here with you. I'm going to mute myself and let you guys introduce yourselves and tell us your superpowers.
First, because that is one of my superpowers, is going first. My name is Michael Kurtz, and I'm one of the crazy misfits that created Record Store Day, along with a bunch of other record store owners. But no one's in charge. I'm kind of the closest thing, sort of, and I'm saying all of this with humor. We are so happy to work with you again, Sam, to do another great project that celebrates the culture of albums and music. That's what we do. That's what our life is about. David?
A guy by voices Beer 1000 with Sam a few years back. And he emailed me earlier in the year and I said, hey, do you know members of Galaxy 500? I want to try to contact them. And I did know them. They're old friends from back in the 80s when I ran WFMU radio in New Jersey. And the band put out 3 great albums and a live album and broke up, but went on to form 2 really terrific groups, Luna and Damon and Naomi. And I stayed in touch with them through the years. They're just old friends, and I connected them with Sam. And that's part of, I guess, why I'm here. We're all here today to crack open the Galaxy 500 beer on Dogfish Head.
Maybe I'll start by saying I wish this beer was more broadly available, but COVID happens. And I know I want to get into the awesome stuff, David, that you did grassroots to make that video series come together. I think it's ironic that Galaxy 500 was on Rough Trade Records, and we were about to do a live show with a bunch of amazing artists covering Galaxy 500. So let's make sure we talk about that and how you turned lemons into lemonade with an amazing series of videos. But briefly on the beer, we just released this. Actually, we released it on Saturday in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, at our brew pub, 11 a.m., 4 packs of 16 ounce. And the graphic is actually the album cover from the record store release. There it is in David's hand, called Copenhagen. I think the mayor of Copenhagen made it impossible for us to call the beer Copenhagen. So we call it Coping, I-N-G, haven, like a haven that helps you cope, like the way this beer is during COVID, especially when you pair it with awesome music. So it's basically it's a beautiful rye Pilsner that has an awesome clarity because it got a shit ton of lagering time and has a little bit of spicy notes to it from the rye. We basically studied ancient Danish brewing recipes and found ingredients, hops, and the original lager yeast that came from that region. And beautiful shirts have been made to celebrate this collaboration as well. So we're super proud of Michael's muscles, the shirt, and the beer. I should also say this was them sitting in this little club in Copenhagen before they went on and did the live album. And we'll get into the live album, the sound later. I'm excited to talk about that with Michael and David. But the federal government made us take off a graffiti of a penis that was on the wall behind them. The federal government made us take, they let this, the image of a poison, I guess, or like a skeleton stay on there, but the human penis had to come off. So other than that, it is faithful to the album artwork. So I hope you guys are enjoying the beer, and I invite anyone within 700 miles of Delaware to road trip down here on Saturday to buy it. So you're holding the album up, David. You want to talk about it?
So you put the record out as well. Dogfish Head you've released several records along with beers.
Yeah.
You want to mention, besides Guided by Voices and Galaxy 500, some of the other, here comes show and tell.
So David and I did a really fun project with Guided by Voices a number of years ago. I don't know. It's like, oh wow, he still got the beer. One of my favorite beers of all time. And David's so sweet. Since that album, since we did this collaboration, he sends me the physical CD of every Guided by Voices new release, which means I get one every 3 weeks because that's how prolific they are.
Which is, I think, like a close to 10% alcohol. Is that right, Sam?
That was 10% alcohol. 10 times 10 times 10.
Oh, that's right.
1,000. And then we had a blast doing a beautiful album with Juliana Barwick, the electronic musician that you used to manage, who's done beautiful, beautiful work. And we actually had her, we mic'd up the brewing equipment in our facility, and she used those field recordings of brewing sounds and integrated them into a 4-song EP. So we've had a lot of fun together, David, with the artists that we both love to work with.
You've also done recently Flaming Lips last year, Flaming Lips beer.
Yeah, that was a super fun one a couple of years ago, and Michael was instrumental in helping us get those albums into Record Store Day because we had a limited number of them that actually we injected the beer into the vinyl itself. That became a real collector's item, which is a really, really fun project.
The Guided by Voices record, I think, is a really cool that this was not a Record Store Day, but instead the 1,000 copies were made. And
we hand loaded it into 1,000 pieces of beer.
The cases of 4 packs. It's a 10-inch record, which I think is kind of the equivalent of the 4-pack of beer. I love 10-inch records, and I love the 4-pack as opposed to the normal 6-pack. Don't you think there's an analogous? They're both very special. But this was only available. Dogfish was distributed in approximately 36 states, right?
Yep, back then when it was released.
So it was driving Guided by Voices fans and collectors nuts trying to, find this rare record, which was a 1994 vintage live recording at Thread Waxing Space in New York. And I love the fact of just driving people nuts trying to find it, and that they had to buy a case of beer to get it. And that was a lot of fun. But also, even the record itself was a challenge. I knew this recording existed from 1994. One track had wound up on a compilation of concerts from that space in New York in 1994. So I knew this recording existed. I was at the concert, but nobody had the recording. And I, for years, hunted to track it down, and I contacted the old label, and I actually, they had never paid composer royalties to Bob for their CD. And it's funny, when I contacted them, they sort of acted like they didn't understand what I was talking about of paying mechanical royalties. But I said, okay, they agreed, yes, I was right, and they owed us some money. And I said, can we get the recording, the original recording that you made of the concert? And they're like, okay, but they couldn't find it. They hunted and did not know where it was. The label's now defunct. And then years later, Planetary Promotions, who do radio promotions for Guided by Voices, they're based in California, and they were moving their offices, and they were cleaning out, closets that had not been looked at, in years, and they stumbled upon a box, and they had no idea how it got there. There was a box with the master tapes of this concert, and apparently, this company who had not paid us had also not paid Planetary Promotions and owed them a lot of money, and they sent them stuff as collateral. They sent them a box of who knows what, but they found the master tape of the Guided by Voices 1994 concert, which is a very rare thing. It was a real professional recording from 94.
It was kismet. Michael, do you remember your first encounter with Guided by Voices? For me, it was B1000 was my entry, as I think a lot of people. I think that's probably their most highly regarded album of all time, and that was right before that came out. As actually there was a review of it, a roundup in Art Forum magazine of the best 10 albums of the year, and B1000 was number one, and I sought it out and fell in love with it. Michael, were you a Guided by Voices fan from back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm on, yeah, I wasn't like at that point like rabid fan in the sense that I'd seen him live and I really liked it, and it kind of I'm a little older, so my band of that era would be like the Replacements. That's kind of where I really got into that super awesome kind of live band. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, aren't there songs like Ramones like and really short and like punkish pop kind of, right?
I think The Club Is Open is about 22 seconds.
Dogfish Head fans who don't know who Guided by Voices are, the Washington Post famously described them as the Grateful Dead equivalent for people who like beer rather than LSD.
I'd put the Replacements and Guided by Voices into that category. I was so excited to see the Replacements because they were my favorite band, Michael, like from Tim to Let It Be. And when I finally did get to see them live, I think it was in their death throes, I think during their Don't Tell a Soul era. And I saw them play the Allentown Fairgrounds, and they were opening for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And I got there as they went on. They were so shit-faced that Tommy threw up in his hands and threw it in the audience, and they immediately took them off the stage. It was like a 1 or 2 song set. And I was so pissed. But then I was like, you know what? That's kind of how you want to see the Replacements,
I think my favorite time seeing them was when they played in an ice skating rink in North Carolina, and Bob was just on fire, and I think he passed out on stage around the 5th or 6th song, and the band just kept roaring on. It was so inspired and just so free. It was just fantastic show. And I remember talking to the guys at the record store about them after everybody saw them, and we'd all at that point, I guess, Let It Bleed or Let It Be came out. And so we, Can't Hardly Wait was like, played in the record store like constantly. And afterwards, the whole discussion was, would they be as big as the Beatles? Because nobody had like been that amazing since the Beatles. This record store conversation. To you, Bob.
Mind to me.
Go ahead.
Dogfish put together a Guided by Voices concert in Delaware. Is in Milton, Delaware, near your plant.
Yeah.
And we got a big tour of the plant, and it was in a beautiful old theater. I don't remember the name of the theater, but it was styled them out, beautiful theater, and only this beer 1000, at 10% alcohol was served, and this is an audience who's used to the Miller Lite end of the spectrum, and I think we're not quite aware that this was 10% alcohol. And
yeah,
I've never seen a drunker crowd in my life.
And you've been to a lot of Guided by Voices concerts, so that's quite a statement.
I've been to at least 100 Guided by Voices concerts, and this was by far the drunkest Guided by Voices, at least for the audience, not necessarily the band, but the audience, including Sam, who was front and center.
Yeah, and before they took the stage, we gave Robert, you and I, David, gave Robert and the band a tour of the brewery, and on that day it was Kismet. And before you jumped on, David, Michael was riffing on his guitar, a classic Miles Davis song. And when I gave Robert Pollard and the band a tour of the brewery, we just happened that day to be bottling 750 ml big champagne bottles of Bitches Brew, the collaboration we do with Miles Davis and his family. And Robert went right up to the bottling line, you know, risking losing a finger in all the moving parts. Got the bottle before the capper went on top of it, and drank a whole 750 of Bitches Brew, which is 10% alcohol. And that was an hour before he went on the stage. And that beautiful old theater you referenced had been used for plays and movies, but had not had a live concert in it in over 30 years. And when Guy by Voices plugged in and started playing, all the gold leaf paint on the ceiling that had been chipping, every time the bass of the drums would hit, it would vibrate the paint chips off the ceiling. So for the entire concert, it looked like it was raining gold while we were drinking our faces off. And it was one of the most magical nights of my life. Robert Pollard signed a poster for my son before they went on. And then while they played, he and I passed a bottle of tequila back and forth from the stage. And by the end of the night, he signed another poster for my son, Sammy, who at that age was 12. And Sammy said, "Hey, Dad, how come in this poster I can read his name from before, and that the poster he signed at the end, it looks like a dead person's heartbeat because it just had across the side."
That's amazing. I've tried Miles Davis beer. I mean, what other you made with bands? There's a Bonnie Prince Billy beer.
Yep. Will Oldham's a great friend of mine. I still chat with him a lot. I mentioned we did a beer with Pearl Jam, which was a lot of fun to do. We mentioned Juliana Barwick, Deltron 3030, the hip hop band. Last year, Michael and I and the Grateful Dead did an album called Sage and Spirit, and we do a beer called Hazy Ripple with the Grateful Dead. So those are among my favorite collabs. And we'll talk about Record Store Day releases, because that was the Sage and Spirit was the one we did last year, the Galaxy 500, which I want to go deeper into that band with you guys in a few minutes. But for now, Michael, why don't you take the lead on? I've already been in touch with our mutual friend Steve Fallon, who David, I know you know too, because he is a dude who ended up down here in coastal Delaware, and he owns 2 great Record Store Days. What other rural town in a state that doesn't even have an airport has 2 Record Store Days? It's 2 record stores 2 blocks away from each other, but that's Steve Fallon. And he also was the guy who ran Maxwell's in New Jersey, where every awesome indie rock and punk band came through. And so I've already emailed him to say, hey, these are the records I hope you saved for me for Record Store Day. So I'm going to hand it over to Michael to talk about some of your favorite releases that are coming out on Saturday.
All right. I was holding up a record that I picked up in the record store here in Bozeman called Cactus Records. And it's one of Steve Fallon's records. He actually ran a record label too called Coyote and did a lot of cool stuff. But for Record Store Day this year, it's always a bit of you started out and you don't know where it's going to go. You don't know who's going to get excited and do different things and where it's all going to fall. But we started with Brandi Carlile being our ambassador, and she went in the studio with Soundgarden and recorded 2 other classic songs specifically for Record Store Day. And I love it when artists do that kind of stuff, because the limited edition is a piece of art, and it reinforces in everybody's mind, especially if you're a serious fan of the band, that this is really special. It's not disposable. It's not background. It's not wallpaper. There's a real heartbeat behind it, and that's just that's just me. I don't expect other people to be that way, but that's the way I am. So I really get excited when somebody does something that cool. On the big popular side of things, Billie Eilish did a recording with Third Man Records with Jack White, and we're putting that out for Record Store Day, and it's going to be one of the bigger runs. It's about 10,000 or 15,000, which is big for us because we usually don't do those kind of numbers. And it's not that we're trying to create, I forget, there's a negative things that people spend on it, like what do they call it? I don't know, some like your fake demand or something. I don't know what it is. I don't commit the shit to memory because I'm too busy having a good time and I don't really care. But we typically try to do things because we're making a statement. We try to ask the artist to number them. And you guys do that kind of stuff. You do limited edition things. This is our life. This is what we want to do with it. And so I encourage all that kind of creativity as much as I can. You know, Bowie was a big fan of Record Store Day, and we got 2 Record Store Day releases from his estate this year, two live albums. One is from the tour he did between Young Americans and Diamond Dogs. It was really the Diamond Dogs tour, and he only did it in the U.S. So it's really an American-centric thing that Bowie did, where he really adopted the sound of Philly soul. And along those lines, we've got the Nat Turner Rebellion record coming out. Nat Turner was made this incredible incendiary record, really questioning, you know, America, the concept of freedom and all that kind of stuff from a black man's perspective. And the record went nowhere. I don't even, you know, but a guy who worked at the university found the masters, and is putting it out for Record Store Day. And that kind of stuff happens, like David had mentioned about the Guided by Voices thing. I mean, people find these tapes. Nat went on to write all the big hits for Spinners. And so he took all of his creativity and turned it into like pop hits, you know. So that's really cool. I mean, we got New Order, Peel Sessions record coming out. Another interesting thing is Stephen Wilson from Porcupine Tree is now going in and being hired to remix classic records. I don't know many people know who he is, but he's just this fantastic songwriter. People think of him almost like a prog rock artist because he's so creative, and it relates so much more to like Yes or something sometimes, you know. But he's not that. He's beyond that. I mean, some of the songs sound like a Prince song or Michael Jackson almost. They can be that. But anyway, he's reimagined or remixed these Roxy Music, Ultravox records, and he's done a bunch of it. He's done like a couple of Yes albums. I think he did a Jethro Tull record, but he's not somebody easily to be shoehorned. And so his version of these records should be pretty interesting.
So is that the Roxy release on Saturday, one that he remixed?
It's the very first album. And same thing with Ultravox. Those are his visions of those records and what they really should sound like in the year 2020. So that kind of Record Store Day stuff, I just love it. You know, I mean, it's just people having fun and putting their, you know, heart into what they're doing. U2's always been a big fan of Record Store Day, and I'm a huge U2 fan. Anybody who's seen them live knows what I'm talking about. They are one of the greatest live bands of all time, equal to The Who, surpass the Stones in my opinion. Just phenomenal rock show. And they're putting out their very first EP that they did with Martin Hannett, the guy who produced Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart. That's the most famous song on the first Joy Division album. And it has that sound of the 80s. The drums are real electronic sounding. And you hear that version of the U2, and when they're just literally boys, they're, you know, in their late teens when they make these recordings. So that's a really pretty cool record. We always have a couple of soundtracks. We got one from Brian Eno, and I've always wanted to have more Brian Eno releases, but I think this is our second one we've ever done in 13 years. And then we have an Ennio Morricone soundtrack too. I don't know if people are familiar with him, but he has these really memorable melodies with his haunting strings, and it's just, you know, and always with a little sense of humor too. So it's really cool. And Pink Floyd is doing a release. Pink Floyd also, that estate, is a very big fan of Record Store Day, and they almost always do something. This record is really special because it's the last performance they did with the original band, Richard Wright, Roger Waters, David Gilmour, Nick Mason. And it was a tribute concert for Syd Barrett, who arguably was the genius behind the band. And they're doing Arnold Layne. And it's the very last performance at a concert at the Bataclan. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, the French theater. And it's a very emotional performance because this is one of the greatest bands of all time saying goodbye to each other on the track, written by the guy who created the band. So I'm really looking forward to hearing it. I haven't heard it yet. So that's one of the ones I'm going to seek out. I did want to give one shout out to Hal Wilner because we're putting out his Angel-Headed Hipster record tomorrow on a special white record. And most people don't know who Hal is. David probably can speak to him more. Musical genius, beloved by pretty much everybody from Nick Cave to Bono to Peaches to, you name it. If you're a major artist, you're in love with Hal Wilner and what he represented. And his last project was a reimagining of Mark Bolan and T-Rex. And it's got a lot of great artists, and they're going to be celebrating this release after Friday by doing a series of television shows on with James Corden. Going to be Sean Lennon and Charlotte Kemp, and there's quite a few other ones. Like David, you might remember them that are coming up. But Hal and I had met on Record Store Day a couple years ago and had a really nice conversation about Tiny Tim, and it turned into a long-term relationship. And we had this whole dream about what we were going to do with artists in Record Store Day. Sadly, he died of COVID-19, and not that that's what he should be remembered of, but that's why he's not here. And so anybody listening, if you want a really fantastic experience, go to your record store and pick it up. It'll be in the stores tomorrow.
Nice. And so, David, can you start before you talk about some of your favorite releases on the list? And I'd love to hear about the Lennon Yoko one that's on the list this year. But can you maybe start about your feelings about the Hal and that artist?
What? Sorry.
Can you pick up where Michael ended about that artist who I don't know a lot about, who's going to be on all these amazing TV shows this week?
T-Rex is, there's a tribute. Hal Wilner put together this tribute to T-Rex, and Hal, since the mid '80s, has put together some amazing collections of covers, of songs by different artists. From Thelonious Monk to this one, T-Rex. He did one of Disney songs with really amazing. I think the Replacements played on the Disney album.
Was that Stay Awake?
Yeah.
The album Stay Awake.
I was involved with Saturday Night Live for about, 40 or more, maybe more longer than that, at least 40 years. Hal was involved with the music at Saturday Night Live, and but produced albums by Lou Reed and Marianne Faithfull and many others. He was really beloved person. He passed away of COVID in March, way too young, and put together these amazing collections, and really had a great knack for putting together collections of people, that are just from all areas, on these collections, the Stay Awake ran from the Replacements to Sun Ra.
NRBQ was on that.
BQ. It really, he knew no boundaries at all, and he was really an inspiration to me. He was a great guy who I'd run into a lot at shows in New York back in the old days when there were shows. It makes me, I've known him since the mid '80s, and I just keep on running into him, and we worked on some projects together. But his albums were just an amazing inspiration to me, and he was a wonderful mentor and great guy, a really wonderful person. And
nice. What about some of the albums coming out on Saturday that you're excited about? And please do take a moment to talk about some of the artists that have albums coming out that you work with.
All right, I'll get the plugs out of the way quickly. We've got a God of My Voices 10-inch record. This is a little tiny record.
This
is the 20th anniversary of Hold On Hope EP, which has 8 B-sides collected. There's a lot of anniversaries with God of My Voices. It's last week we had the 25th anniversary of Alien Lanes came out just last week. It's very hard for me to keep up with all these anniversaries, but it's great that the vinyl just keeps on coming out and more people can pick it up on vinyl. This came out last week, and I'm plugging New album by Guide by Voices is Mirrored Aztec, which also came out last week, which is wonderful. And also on Record Store Day tomorrow, from another band I work with is Surfer Blood. And this is a 10th anniversary deluxe reissue of their debut album, Astro Coast. This is a double record. They've included a whole bunch of demos and live tracks, and a beautiful gatefold sleeve. And it's like one record is blue and one is purple. So very cool, and lots of, it's got a poster inside from an old Polaroid. So that's Surfer Blood, and that's coming out. And Surfer Blood's also, I think, Saturday at 7 o'clock Eastern, Rough Trade Brooklyn, which is my favorite local store, and yeah, an amazing bunch of stores in England. Rough Trade, Surfer Blood's playing a special concert for Rough Trade on their Instagram, 7 o'clock Eastern on Saturday. So that's, now I've got my plugs out of the way.
I'm going to ask you to do one more plug because you're ending on Surfer Blood, who's played at Dogfish twice, and we love them. Yeah. Is Prescient, because it's a great segue. They're one of the amazing bands that contributed to the live video series. When I mentioned you made lemonade out of lemons, the three of us, me, you, Michael, were working with Rough Trade Brooklyn to host a live concert where we hope to serve this beer pre-COVID. And when that didn't happen, your tenaciousness was uncommon valor, and you still made something beautiful happen. Can you talk about that project? What?
I mean, I introduced Sam to Galaxy 500, and he miraculously just turned it around. Like a week later, he's like, "We're putting out the record, and we're putting out a beer, and it's coming out April 18th." It's just like that. It happened very quickly. He's like, why don't we? The band broke up, 30 years ago, so they can't play. But I was thinking about doing a tribute concert at Rough Trade in Brooklyn that same day, and maybe we can, get some bands together. And I volunteered. I'm like, wait, if you're going to do that, let me do it, because I don't want somebody else fucking it up. Let me pick the bands. So I volunteered to do this, and I didn't realize it was going to be a 8-month project. So the concert, obviously was canceled April 18th, and Record Store Day was unfortunately canceled. And one of the bands, Zuzu, said, "Hey, how about I record a song at home? Why don't we get some bands to record their songs?" Since he'd already worked out his performance, and he inspired me. And I think Michael recommended him. Michael was involved in this from the start. Yep. And so I started asking the artists we had, scheduled to perform in Brooklyn. And I also said, well, we don't have to limit ourselves to those bands. I can reach out to bands, from all over, because, Real Estate was one of the bands, and they couldn't play on April 18th because they were scheduled for a festival, I think in North Carolina that day. But they were really thrilled and happy to record a song that came out today. And so we did.
People that are listening now go to hear all these amazing videos from Thurston Moore to, to Zuzu. Where do they go on the interwebs to hear these?
It's all collected at 20 videos at 20-20-20.com.
And to be clear, these are all bands playing homages to Galaxy 500. They're all amazing Galaxy 500. So
yeah.
We got a new guest. Who's guesting over there, Michael?
Wave your hand, Katie, so they can see you.
Guided by Voice, excuse me, Galaxy 500 had a rich, a tradition and aesthetic of doing covers on their albums. They had covers, some really great and obscure and interesting covers. They covered
New Order,
New Order, and George Harrison and Yoko Ono and the Ruddles and Young Marble Giants, and very cool taste, and but the covers were a big part of their aesthetic. and really great choices. And that kind of, inspired me, got me excited about doing this, of having other artists perform their songs.
What was that awesome band from Canada that did the Tugboat cover?
That was Kiwi Jr. Great band. They're about to make a big announcement that they're a young band about to sign with a big, cool label, and put out their second record. What's interesting, Tugboat, tomorrow is the last day of the series, and we've had some great artists, and a couple came in last minute that we didn't announce the band. Tomorrow we've got Mercury Rev, and also a band that wasn't announced, Holy Shit, a song, band from LA. And I didn't know this about them. I just, I reached out, and they are, he is a huge Galaxy 500 fan. I didn't know this. And when I wrote to him, he didn't respond, and I didn't have a list, so we're doubling him up tomorrow. But he just sent a video. He didn't respond to my email, but he sent in a video. And it turns out that when he was 15 years old in 1990, he had a Galaxy 500 cover band called Tugboat, who played concerts.
In 1990, before their 3-album discography was even done, they had a cover band.
They had a cover band and called Tugboat, and he has a video that's up on YouTube, and he did a cover that's going up tomorrow, and that was miraculous. And he was a huge Galaxy 500 was a huge inspiration to them.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of a really special one tomorrow. I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Michael. Wow, we got a rotation of children here, which is awesome. Michael, you mentioned earlier the run sizes for releases. Billie Eilish will press a lot more albums than the average one. Did the range of the scale of the releases change this year because the drops are now segmented into 3 days, or did you guys have to make the decisions on the size of the runs before we got into this COVID situation?
First of all, sorry about the kids. This is COVID-19. We are parenting at home now. Wherever I am, they are. Wherever they are, I am. This is our reality. Most of those records had already been pressed by the time, in fact, all of them had, and they were sitting in warehouses. That was one of the real difficulties when this whole thing came down. It was a sort of a panic moment of, oh shit, what are we going to do? Because a lot of the labels are small independent businesses, and they had a lot of money tied up in pressing of records. But the quantities were pretty much set, and we have a team of about 10 record store owners that are really good from around the world, country, Waterloo, Silver Platters, Soundgarden, Criminal Records, a ton of them. And they give feedback on the quantities. And so we're pretty good about judging on what we want to try to do. But most of those numbers were already established when we had come up, when we decided to move to 3 dates, drop dates.
How did you decide how to curate the list from 1 to 3? Like, how did you decide what goes in drop 1, drop 2, drop 3?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because it got complicated fast because we're an international event. And so what was good for one country was not necessarily good for another. And we had a real difficult time in the beginning where the UK organizers really wanted to go forward because in the UK, businesses were paid by the government, whether they were open or not. Individuals were paid by the government, whether they were working or not. So everybody was flush with cash. That was not the case in the US, Australia, Germany, Japan, and stuff. So we had this whole negotiation, and then we came to an agreement where we'd split it between 3 dates. And you'll find that most of the UK-centric stuff is in the August releases, and partially that's because they're running businesses and their cash flow was really tied up. and they needed to get it released. So, but everybody was a good sport about it. We pulled together, and if you look at the spread over the 3 months, there's just something really cool for everybody in every one of those months.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about the Copenhagen album. I don't know if each of you have gone deep on this album. So basically, the day I emailed David, I was on an Amtrak to New York City, and I was just flipping through my Spotify, and I just the three studio albums were all I'd ever listened to. And I was like, what the hell is this thing that's on Spotify? And I played it. And, I want to get each of yours impressions. But for me, walking from Penn Station to my hotel and listening to that whole album, when it started, I was like, ooh, geez, this is going to be a little bit rough. They're playing in this room with like 12 people. You heard like 2 people clap and 7 people talk. And then after the second song, it sounded like there were 35 people and all of them were listening and the clapping picked up. And like by song 4, the entire room is absolutely on fire and into it, and you can feel the audience knowing they're paying witness to an epic performance. The band was fully dialed in that night. Whoever did the sound in that room nailed it. I believe there was a sound there. I believe it was recorded by the public TV. Or public radio of the state-owned group that had a car outside that they were mixing it from. But it was just it just blew me away. And then I did some looking on the interwebs, and it had never been pressed to vinyl. So David got me in touch with Naomi and Damon and Dean, and I was like, hey guys, I want our company Dogfish, which is obsessed with music, to underwrite the production of this album because it had never been put to vinyl before, and the 2 people on the screen with me today really helped to make it happen. So this is also an opportunity for me to toast the 2 of you for a dream come true project to do this album. But as you guys listen to the album, what are your thoughts that you would leave with fellow music lovers that are tuned in today?
Shall I go first? Oh, David, go.
The concert is 3 sides of the vinyl, and on the 4th side, you probably can't see it on the interweb, but there's this gorgeous etching on the 4th side D of the record, which is incredibly cool. Thumbs up, Sam.
That was Naomi and Damon's idea to do that etching on the 4th side. So thumbs up to all 3 members, Dean, Naomi, and Damon.
Well, for me, it's been a long time since the album came out, so I had to go back to it. And being in the world that we're in now, not being available, I probably could have got it for the band site, but it was a bit of a revelation. For me, when the song 4th of July kicks in, that's when the magic really happens. I'm that kind of listener. Everything about it spoke to me. I love the story. I love the way. I guess is it? It's not Damon singing. Is Dean singing? Yeah. And I've always
leads on one of the songs.
I really love the bass playing. That's probably one of my favorite things about this band. It's just sort of this understated thing that just has a charm to it. And then the thing that just slayed me is the Yoko Ono cover of Listen, the Snow is Falling, because, I've always been a John Yoko fan. And that song takes me back to that. And the way they treated it was so awesome that I just kind of melted. So I could go on and on about John and Yoko, but I won't do that. I mean, they changed everything, and this is another band that I think they affected, and that affected other people. So, yeah.
That's nice. Yeah, when you think of the bands, when you say that you know that Galaxy 500 was affected by them, obviously because they covered them, and when you think of the lineage, you know, of Galaxy 500, Boston-based, I think they all went to high school together, which is pretty amazing. And the touchstones that I hear in their work would be like the Velvet Underground for sure, but also Jonathan Richman, their city mate, and who would also, you know, that's great baton passing. I think of those three artists. I don't know if Jonathan Richman says that he was inspired by the Velvet Underground, but David, you're waving your head. You probably know more about that than I do.
A huge Velvet Underground fan, and spent a lot of time with them. Friend of Velvet Underground, and Galaxy 500 covered an obscure Jonathan song, "Don't Let Our Youth Go to Waste." But yeah, so there's definitely a passing of the torch there. And Galaxy 500 for me, you know, through the years, I was casually friends with the members, but I just kept going back. For me, it was their first album, Today, was the one that's really special to me. And I just would go back to it again and again and again. And I think of my favorite rock records, and that's on there. And the Modern Lovers, Jonathan Richman's band, are among my favorites. Absolutely, you know, and certainly I could Velvet Underground and Nico probably make my if I was forced to make a top 10 list, those three might all make it. It's really a great lineage, and those are three great records.
Nice. So I got a question. Janelle, my partner in time here, reminded me we have questions coming in, and if folks have questions, please put them into the chat here. But what are we drinking was one of the questions from someone who just joined. So put up your can. So that is our label of this beer that Brian Selders brewed at our pub, which is Copenhagen, our homage to the album Copenhagen. That gets its first ever vinyl release Saturday, Record Store Day of this week. And the other question we had was, how do we decide our pathway when we collaborate with an artist? And what I'm proud to say is, much like those gold shards that fell off the ceiling when Guided by Voices played in Milton that were like snowflakes, you know, for us, every collaboration is like a snowflake, where every single one has a different vibe to it and a different sort of DNA to it. I mentioned Juliana Barwick, who's one of my favorite artists. When we worked with her, we mic'd up different pieces of equipment in the brewery, recorded it, and she integrated that into a 4-song EP. When we did our collaboration with the Flaming Lips, you know, I talked to Wayne Coyne, and he's like, hey, let's do this, but from here forward, you communicate in words, and I'm going to communicate in photographs and drawings. And that was super fucking cool. And then I got to ride bikes with him on Record Store Day in Oklahoma City, as we went from record store to record store with Wayne Coyne. So they were way into it. But I will say, like, the cathartic part of doing a collaboration, the reward comes when both entities are equally committed and invested in that collaboration. So I won't name names. Grateful Dead is an example of another great partnership. The band was into it. Their curator and historian, David Lemieux, was way into it. But I won't name names, but we've done collaborations with big artists that, frankly, they were like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to be super involved in the creative process. And then they got busy, which is cool. But you could the karma of the collab fell flat because the other collaborative partner wasn't as invested in it, which is a roundabout way for me to say this is certainly one of the most cathartic collaborations I've ever been involved with, because it's just so multi-layered. You know, Michael, from your work on shepherding this album into the Record Store Day release, David, to all your work with all the other artists that we got to celebrate Galaxy 500. It's so subjective when you think of, you know, how many Surfer Blood fans are discovering Galaxy 500 for the first time. How many, you know, Sonic Youth fans, maybe even, you know, folks around my age are discovering them because of the work that you've done in the last, few months to put this video series together. That shit's exponential and unmeasurable, to the legacy of Galaxy 500, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I'm so Sam for making this happen and just working with people like Galaxy 500 and Juliana Barwick. It's it's really pretty amazing. Even never mind cool beers, but you stand out, with your music taste as being exceptionally and keep just trusting, putting out your gut instincts and what you love. That's fantastic. That's what really inspires me is
Thank you, David.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah. I don't know how much more time we have. One other thing I want to ask to Michael would be, obviously our country's having a horrifically challenging moment. I saw a meme recently that said right now Canada must feel like they live in the apartment upstairs from a meth lab, which I thought was appropriate. But we also in America are recognizing that we have to confront our challenges with racism and inclusion. And Michael, as I look through the back catalog of Record Store Day, the diversity of artists, the genre, but also the ethnic diversity of artists, I think is ahead of its time. Did that just happen naturally because a love of music is colorblind and just blind generally, or are the years when you're conscious of the diversity of artists that have releases on Record Store Day?
It reflects, Record Store Day reflects the culture of record stores, and that's why it is that way. If you go to a good record store, you're going to find a great jazz selection, you're going to find a great hip-hop selection, you're going to find a great soul selection. But we are living in a time where we're all sort of got a bit of a reckoning going on. When the music industry asked everybody to take the Tuesday off and to think about where you are with your relationship with Black people in a country that's, has a very checkered past. It's, not a lot of it, not good, especially if you're Black people, a Black person. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen people more talented than me that had more pigment than me that got less opportunity. That's very real. I took that Tuesday to think about what's going on, and I see the systemic racism in the music industry. It's everything from the charting companies to the streaming companies to the record labels themselves. And it's not like they did it maliciously. It's just sort of it's sort of a entropy kind of thing that's happening. The good news is that when you challenge it, some doors open. We are organizing a group of Black-owned record stores, and Sam, this is something I'd love to work with you on. There are only about 20 left in the United States because the infrastructure for it, the systemic racism and financing to renting to everything, very real, makes it incredibly difficult, and artists don't understand really the implications when they don't make physical goods for fans of hip hop and everything. We're going to work on that, and we're going to make things better. That's in the works now. We're talking about putting out records specifically to revive these 20 remaining independently owned Black record stores. So as far as like the records that we do, yeah, some of it is personality, some of it's me, like or somebody else in the organization who's really excited about a record and wants to see it happen. And luckily, there's not a lot of snobisms going on. People think of record stores in the rough, what was the name? High fidelity sense. There's some of that happens, but mostly people go there because it's a really positive experience. And if I could just end by saying, being a resident of the meth lab below Canada, there's a lot of good that goes on. Like last week or so, Taylor Swift sent autographed CDs to record stores all around the United States and told their fans, go there and get it. And that was really a cool thing to do. And it really was a beautiful thing for the record stores who are suffering and struggling to try to stay alive. Thank you, Taylor Swift, for that. But the reason I bring the story up is that there's problems with shipping now too. So when those records arrived in boxes at record stores, often it was before the store opened, and those boxes were sitting outside the store, and fans actually came and sat watch over them until the store opened, so that stores could have those records and give them to the fans. And they could have flipped them on eBay, they could have stolen them and flipped them on. They didn't. They helped. So I'd like to end on that positive note and take a sip of this beer.
That's an awesome story. I think of them as like you ever see penguins? They take turns sitting on the egg when the wind's hitting them. That's pretty cool. David, what about you? I know we're towards the end of our time here. We got a few more minutes. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I want to just encourage people to support record stores. You know, with the pandemic, we're definitely in a really rough stage for all sorts of businesses. Please support the record stores and buy mail order, particularly your local record store. There's not a lot hanging on, but they're really special places. I've spent a big chunk of my life in record stores, and they're really special to me. And we really need to support them. If one of them disappears, it's not likely that another one's going to come and replace them. So please, maybe instead of buying a gift for a family member, instead of buying flowers, buy them a record if they have a turntable, or buy them a CD. CDs are great too. But let's try to support the record stores and keep them in business this year and next year, or however long this thing goes on. And let's give a shout out to the post office, who are mailing these things, media mail, and our current president is trying to destroy the post office, and that really sucks. Please write to your congressmen and your senators and encourage them, to keep up the fight, to keep the post office and not defund the post office. It's really stupid of trying to privatize and wipe out the post office. It's the backbone of our economy,
Yep.
Particularly this year.
Yep.
Of mailing stuff, things that are crucial to keep, medicine to keep people alive, but also just the amount of, things we need and want on a day-to-day being mailed. It really, really is important.
Yep. Nice. And so I'm gonna leave the last word to one of the co-founders of Record Store Day, because we're on the doorstep of it 2 days from now. Michael, you're gonna take us out, but I'll just say, speaking for myself and Janelle, who's over here, put your head in, Janelle. Come on, let the people see. She's making the magic happen over here, running this shit. I'll just say what I love about all of our coworkers is they're passionate about beer, but the overlap of people that are passionate about craft beer and fantastic music is nearly 100% overlap. And I'm just so excited that Dogfish Head has had this opportunity to be on this journey with Record Store Day now for 6 years, and we're already working on something super fun for next year. And I value this partnership, and I value friendships like I have with you both, David and Michael. Music's one of the greatest solaces in this challenging moment. I take an hour every day and either go on a paddleboard or a bike, and I put in my earphones and I decompress. And it's been really critical to me, and I know I'm speaking for millions of people, that's been one of the most important tools to help navigate this tumultuous moment. So I thank you guys for everything you do on behalf of music. David, thank you so much for what you put together with this video series. It's super cool. And Michael, please take us out.
Oh, wow. I've met a few people in my life. I've been lucky enough to meet a few people in my life who really have changed the world for the better. And I think I'm not just trying to blow smoke up anybody's butt, but Sam, you really have made a big difference. And the collaborations we've done have opened doors that we don't even know about. And we've turned people on to music in ways that we couldn't have imagined. It's just been fantastic to work with you. It's been, this particular project is really special for a lot of reasons. And you've made a damn good beer once again. So thank you for that. Thank you for what you're doing. And David, I've told you this offline. You did magical stuff with this that took it to a level I just could not have imagined. You reached people all through Europe on this record, to the point I think that some of the records that were meant for record stores here in the US ended up in Europe because the fans wanted it. And you just got to let stuff like that happen. I mean, it did happen. We've really grown this, and I think I'm going to feel good about the fact that we've turned on a lot of new people to Galaxy 500, and the beer, which is quite good, and you know, Record Store Day, the whole idea of like supporting a local business and keeping that alive, so we can keep that positive energy happening. So thanks for having me. Thanks for everything.
Good night.
Good night.
I'm in a live music room